His knees went first. Jasmine caught him under the arms before his weight hit the floor, her shoulder driving into his ribs, both of them staggering into the parallel bars with a metallic clang that rang down the whole therapy wing. The monitor on the rolling cart shrieked once, then again, and a second nurse came around the corner with her hand already reaching for the call button before she'd fully cleared the doorway. "I've got him." Jasmine's knees were shaking as badly as his. "I've got him, somebody get the chair." He didn't fall. He also didn't help her hold him up. 9 weeks into physical therapy, and his body still treated gravity like a personal insult. Arms locked at his sides, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle working under 3 days of stubble. Nobody was allowed to shave because nobody had signed the consent form. Nobody had signed anything for him. Not once in 89 days. They lowered him into the wheelchair together, her hands under his elbows, his breath coming out in short, furious pulls through his nose, like a man who just lost a fight he didn't remember agreeing to. For half a second, his forehead nearly touched hers as she leaned him back, close enough that she caught the exact moment his eyes flicked to her mouth, and away again, fast, like he'd caught himself doing something he hadn't given himself permission to do. She pretended not to notice. She noticed completely. "That's twice this week," said Dr. Ibarra, appearing in the doorway with a chart she didn't really need, since everyone on this floor had the details memorized by now. Male, mid-30s. Found unconscious off Route 9 with no wallet, no phone, and enough of a chemical cocktail in his blood that the lab had run the panel 3 times because the numbers kept looking like a mistake. His legs are strong enough. It's not strength. It's like his brain forgot the instructions. He's trying. I didn't say he wasn't. The man in the chair said nothing. He never said anything, not because he couldn't. His throat worked fine. His eyes tracked. His hand could close around a cup of water if you set it in exactly the right spot. But because in 9 weeks he had not offered a single word to a single person in this building, and the silence had stopped feeling like injury around week 5 and started feeling, to some of the staff, like a decision. Jasmine wheeled him back toward his room with one hand on the chair and the other pressed flat against her own sternum. Her badge read J. Carter, PT. She'd worked 11 years to earn that badge. She had not worked 11 years to develop feelings for a man whose name she didn't know, whose past was a locked door, whose only visitor in 3 months was an 8-year-old with a roll of tape and more faith than the situation had any right to deserve. 2 floors up, in an office with better carpet, the hospital's administrator hung up on county services for the 4th time that week and immediately picked the phone back up to call the billing department instead, which was its own kind of bad news. 6 figures. No family. No ID. Somewhere in the building, a decision was already starting to take shape that nobody in room 307 knew about yet. A deadline. A date on a calendar. The quiet machinery of a hospital deciding how long it could keep absorbing a debt with no name attached to it. Down the hall, a girl in a purple raincoat slipped past the nurse's station, using the exact route she'd used every day for 3 months. The one that put a supply cart between her and anyone likely to ask questions. Room 307's door stood propped open the way it always did. "You're back early," Mia told the empty bed, then remembered and corrected herself. "I mean, you're at therapy. That's good. That means you're getting stronger." She unrolled a new drawing from her cardboard tube and taped it beside the window, at the end of a row that now ran the length of the wall. A man standing under a yellow sun, holding hands with a girl on one side and a woman on the other. She'd worked hard on the knees this time. Straight, locked, standing. 89, she wrote in the corner. Underneath, smaller, "You're going to walk soon, I can tell." The wheelchair came through the door behind her before she'd finished the last letter, her mother's voice arriving first. Jasmine stopped dead at the sight of her daughter mid-installation. "Mia, I was just leaving." "You were just arriving, I can see the tape in your hand." Jasmine set the brake and rubbed a hand down her face. Behind her, the man had gone very still, not asleep, elsewhere. "This isn't your room, baby. He needs rest, not a gallery opening every afternoon." "He likes them." "You don't know that." "I do, though." Mia climbed down off the stool, unhurried. Nobody else comes. Somebody has to tell him things are going to be okay. Jasmine opened her mouth with the whole speech loaded, and then really looked at the wall. Dozens of dated pages. A story told one frame at a time. And there, near the end, she stepped closer without deciding to a man with his gown open at the collar, a small dark mark drawn just below his ribs, left side. Her stomach dropped and settled wrong. She looked at the man in the chair. At the exact place on his ribs where, under 3 layers of hospital cotton, there was in fact a puckered old scar nobody had ever explained. Mia, when did you draw this one? Day 40. Why? Somebody didn't show you. Nobody showed me anything. Mia looked at her like the question was strange. I just draw what feels true. The man's hand moved. A few inches off the armrest, fingers curling toward the wall of paper, aimed, not reflexive. Mia stepped back. Mia stepped closer instead, put her small hand into his open one and said, "See, I told you. You always come back a little more." His fingers closed. Barely, but they closed. And his eyes, for the second time that day, and this time longer, found Jasmine's, and held them with a focus that made the back of her neck go warm despite every rule she'd just recited in her head. Nobody on this floor had ever once caught him looking at anyone like he was actually seeing them. She was starting to understand she wanted to be the only one he looked at that way, and adding a little that she wanted it. Before we go any further, I want to say welcome. Whether you've been with this story since day 1 or you just found us tonight, I'm glad you're here. If room 307 already has its hooks in you, do me a favor and hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from tonight. I read every single one. Now, back to the story, because it's about to get a lot more complicated for all 3 of them. 40 minutes south, in a glass-walled conference room that smelled like new carpet and old money, Marcus Reed set his phone face down on the table. "Say that again," said Derek Choi, mid-40s. Occupying the office that used to belong to someone, the board had quietly stopped mentioning by name. Unidentified male patient, 90 minutes from here, talks screen consistent. He's been there since March. Since March, Derek's voice didn't rise. That was worse. 3 months and we're hearing about it now. No ID on intake, no family inquiry, nothing that would cross-reference. Marcus turned his phone over, scrolled, set it back down. He's a John Doe. Nobody's looking for a John Doe. Everybody's looking for Kang Woo-jin. In Seoul, in Singapore, nobody's looking for him in a 200-bed hospital outside a town with 1 traffic light. Is he talking? No. Is he going to? Marcus was quiet a beat too long, long enough that Derek's eyes narrowed, cataloging the hesitation the way he cataloged everything, as leverage he might need later. I'd like to send someone to confirm before we decide whether this is a problem or an opportunity. Derek didn't sit back down. Send someone today. And Marcus. He waited until Marcus looked up. If this becomes a problem, it becomes your problem. You vetted the transition. Your name's on the paperwork that says Woo-jin authorized his own medical leave. Something flickered across Marcus's face and was gone before it could be named. He'd signed that paperwork 11 weeks ago, in this same room, telling himself it was temporary, telling himself 100 other things that had all turned out to be the same lie wearing different clothes. He picked up his phone and walked out without answering, because some questions are easier to survive if you never let yourself hear them out loud. Back in room 307, the moment folded down into something smaller. Mia narrated the wall like a docent giving a tour nobody asked for. The man's hand rested again, unmoving, on the armrest. The reach toward her had clearly cost him something. He's tired, Jasmine said. That's a good tired, though. I know, Mia rolled her eyes. I've been telling you that for weeks. Jasmine crouched to check the wheelchair brakes out of nervous habit and let herself, for exactly 4 seconds, look at the man's face instead of his chart. Somebody's son, she thought, and cut it off there, because the last time she'd finished a thought like that about a man with good hands and an expensive jaw, it had cost her 2 years, a broken engagement, and a lesson she'd sworn she wouldn't need twice. His eyes opened again, found her. His mouth moved, no sound, just shape, gone before she could read it, and then his eyes shut, spent. "Did you see that?" Mia whispered. "I saw it." Jasmine didn't answer the rest of it, because she didn't trust what her voice would do. That night, alone in her kitchen after Mia was asleep, she caught herself running her thumb over the spot on her forearm where his fingers had gripped her during the fall, a bruise already forming, 4 small marks in a neat row, and she sat with that a long time before she made herself stop. He gripped the parallel bars 2 days later and held himself upright for 11 seconds before his legs gave out. This time, when Jasmine caught him, he didn't go rigid. His hand found her forearm and held on, and when she lowered him back into the chair, his eyes carried an apology so specific she almost laughed. "Sorry, I know that wasn't much." 11 seconds more than yesterday, she told him, and meant it. He started making sounds 2 days after that, fragments, syllables dissolving before they finished forming. She sat with him through it without filling the silence for him. And on the morning she came in late, exhausted, smelling faintly of children's cough syrup because Mia had spiked a fever overnight. His hand found hers on the bar rail before she'd finished apologizing, and squeezed once, and let go, like he'd needed to confirm she was really there before he could believe it. She stood there a second too long with her hand still warm from his. Then she made herself pick up the clipboard, because the clipboard didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. The next session, he refused a routine stretch, arms crossing, jaw setting, until she sat directly in front of him, knee to knee, and guided the movement herself instead of letting the tech do it. He let her. Only her. When her hands wrapped around his calf to check the resistance, his breath changed, just slightly, and she felt it more than heard it, and neither of them said anything about it, and the not saying anything sat in the room like a third person. "You do that on purpose," she said finally, not quite a question. His eyes found hers, held them. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, more the ghost of the idea of one, the first expression she'd seen on his face that wasn't pain or effort. "You're not supposed to have opinions about your physical therapist," she said, half a laugh in it despite herself, standing up too fast, putting 6 feet of tile back between them like the tile was going to fix anything. He watched her go. He always watched her go now. She'd started timing her exits to avoid catching him doing it, and failing every time. The man who arrived that Wednesday didn't look like trouble. Gray suit. Laminated badge for an insurance auditing firm nobody at the front desk had heard of, and nobody double-checked, because people rarely double-check a man who looks exactly like he belongs where he's standing. He asked, pleasantly, whether the hospital had any long-term unidentified patients on file. The woman at admissions pulled up exactly one match and told him the room number without a flicker of suspicion. He thanked her. He did not go to the room. He went to the parking lot instead, sat in a gray sedan, and made a call that lasted 90 seconds. "It's him, confirmed, room 307. Marcus closed his eyes before answering. "Don't approach him. Not yet. I need to talk to Derek first." He hung up before the man in the gray suit could ask what "not yet" actually bought anyone. That same afternoon, 3 floors above, the hospital's administrator called a short staff meeting nobody wanted to attend. "Legal says if we don't get a name attached to this patient in the next 2 weeks, we transfer him to a state facility 2 hours from here," she said, and the room went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with agreement. Jasmine, standing at the back with her arms crossed, felt something in her chest go cold and territorial in a way she had no professional right to feel. 2 weeks. She did the math without meaning to. Day 103 would be the deadline. Mia didn't know yet. Jasmine wasn't sure how she was going to be the one to tell her. Mia found out anyway, the way children always find out the things adults try to protect them from. She came home from school 3 days later and didn't say a word at dinner, which was its own kind of alarm, because Mia never stopped talking at dinner. "Baby, what's wrong?" "Sarah's mom works at the hospital too. She said they're sending him away." Mia's chin was doing the thing it did right before she cried and refused to let herself. "Is that true?" Jasmine set down her fork. "It might happen, if nobody figures out who he is in time. Then we have to figure it out first." "Mia, that's not really something we can." "Why not?" Mia's voice cracked on the second word, and she didn't wait for an answer, just shoved back from the table and went to her room, and came back 4 minutes later with the cardboard tube and dumped every drawing she'd ever made out onto the kitchen table. 80, 90 pages, 100, spread out like evidence at a trial only one of them had been building. "Look," she said, jabbing a finger at one from 3 weeks back. "That skyline, I didn't make that up. I don't know towers like that. I never even saw towers like that." She pulled another. "This symbol, on his sleeve. I drew it before I ever saw it, and then I saw it on the folder the doctor had, and it's the same one, Mommy. I checked twice." Jasmine went very still, looking down at 89 days of a child's careful, unknowing surveillance of a man's forgotten identity, laid out across her kitchen table like a puzzle nobody else in the building had thought to assemble. "Show me," she said. "Show me everything, all of it right now." They stayed at that table until midnight. Whatever it is that's kept you here this long, the mystery, the man in that bed, the little girl who refuses to give up on him, or maybe just wanting to know if Jasmine's ever going to let herself want what it's obvious she already wants. I'm glad it's working. If you're new to this channel tonight, welcome, genuinely, pull up a chair. If you've been riding with this story from the start, thank you for staying. Either way, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. I want to know how far this story's traveling. Now let's get back to room 307, because what happens next changes everything. He said his first real word on day 101. Not a fragment, not a sound that dissolved before it finished. A word, small, cracked down the middle from disuse, but unmistakably a word. And he said it to Jasmine at the end of a session, when she'd gathered her things and turned to go the way she did every single day, timing her exit so she wouldn't have to watch him watch her leave. "Stay." She stopped with her hand on the doorframe, turned around slow, like moving too fast might scare it back out of him. "What did you say?" His jaw worked. It cost him. She could see exactly how much it cost him, the way it had cost him 11 seconds on the parallel bars, the way everything cost him now, every inch of himself he had to fight his own body to reclaim. "Stay," he said again, clearer, and then after a breath that shook on the way in, "Please." She crossed back into the room without deciding to. Knelt in front of the chair so they were eye level, the way she had for the stretch that had gone unspoken between them for weeks now, and this time neither of them pretended there was a clipboard reason for it. "I'm here," she said. "I'm staying." His hand found hers, not gripping through pain this time, not bracing against a fall, just holding. His thumb moved once across her knuckles, slow, deliberate, the exact motion of a man learning something new with his hands and liking what he found. "Who," his voice broke on it, tried again. "Who are you?" "Jasmine." Her own voice wasn't entirely steady either. "My name is Jasmine." "Jasmine." He said it like he was testing whether it would hold his weight, the way he'd tested his own legs on the bars. Something in his face eased when it did. I don't know my." "I know." She squeezed his hand before she could stop herself. "You don't have to know it tonight." For a moment, one long, suspended moment, the kind that has a gravity all its own, his eyes dropped to her mouth the way they had on the day she caught him falling. Except this time he didn't look away fast enough to pretend he hadn't. Neither did she. The space between them had narrowed to almost nothing, close enough that she could feel the unsteady rhythm of his breath, and for one full second she let herself imagine closing that last inch. Then a monitor alarm went off 2 rooms down, sharp and sudden, and the moment shattered as fast as it had built. Jasmine stood so quickly her knees cracked against the wheelchair frame. "I have to, that's not my patient, but I should." "Jasmine." She stopped in the doorway. "Thank you," he said, "for staying 89 days. Nobody stayed, you stayed." She didn't trust herself to answer that with words, so she didn't try. She just nodded once and made herself walk out before she did something neither of them was ready for her to do. She told herself, driving home, that it didn't mean anything. That patient said things to the people who cared for them, that gratitude and attraction wore the same clothes sometimes, and it was her job to know the difference even when her body seemed determined to forget it. She'd believed a version of this story before, a good man, a warm hand, a feeling like being chosen. And it had ended with her sitting in a parked car outside a restaurant, alone, staring at a ring he never took out of his pocket, working out how to explain to her own mother that the wedding wasn't happening after all. She wasn't going to let herself fall for a man with no name and no past. And for all she knew, no shortage of people back in whatever life he'd lost who were far more entitled to stand beside him than she was. She told herself that 3 separate times before she got home. It hadn't worked yet. Downtown, in an apartment with a view he'd stopped being able to enjoy months ago, Marcus Reed poured a drink he didn't finish and stared at a message from Derek that had been sitting unread for 20 minutes. Handle it before he remembers more than his own name. Whatever it takes. He thought about the woman he used to know, a physical therapist now. He'd learned that much today, doing a job that mattered in a way his hadn't in a long time. And he thought, unwillingly, about the version of himself that might have made a different choice 7 years ago, and whether that version of himself would recognize the man currently deciding how to make a hospital patient's memory loss a permanent, convenient condition. He didn't finish the drink. He picked up his phone instead and dialed the man in the gray suit. "Change of plan," he said. "I want eyes on that room tonight." Back in room 307, long after visiting hours had ended, the man who now knew his first name in 89 days lay awake staring at a wall covered in a child's careful proof that someone had never once stopped believing in him. He didn't have his memory. Faces blurred, names slid away like wet stone. But pieces had started surfacing all week, sharp enough now to leave marks. A boardroom with too much glass. A voice he didn't trust telling him to sign something without reading it. A drink he hadn't finished and shouldn't have needed to, because he remembered, with a clarity that spiked the monitor beside his bed, that he never drank at work. Not once in 15 years. He didn't know why he remembered that rule with such certainty when he still couldn't remember his own name. He only knew that somewhere past the parking lot, past the 2-lane road leading back to whatever life had swallowed him whole, someone had broken that rule for him on purpose, and that the same someone was still out there, still deciding what to do about the fact that he hadn't died the way he was supposed to. Down in the parking lot, headlights clicked on. They didn't leave. They turned instead toward the side entrance, the one closest to the stairwell, the one with the camera that had sat broken and unrepaired for 6 weeks, and pulled into the space that gave the clearest view of that door, and settled in to wait. If you want to be here when he finally remembers who did this to him, and when Jasmine finds out exactly who's been sitting in that parking lot, subscribe now so you don't miss it. Like this video if room 307 has you feeling something tonight, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because this community is bigger than I think any of us realize. Part 2 is coming, and it's the one where everything moves fast.